to imagine that you're at a party enjoying the nacho dip. When someone comes around, taps you on the shoulder, you turn around and you start to say hello to this stranger, but he interrupts you and just shouts, "Join the conversation," in your face, and then walks away without waiting for any sort of a reply. It's not a great way to start a relationship. It's kind of weird. Join the conversation. What do you mean by that? Why? What's the point? And I'm going to admit that the seed of this whole presentation sort of is just me wanting to give this phrase kind of a hard time. You see it so often. But it's also going to be an opportunity for the four of us to share some of the things that have and haven't worked for our very different organizations. So I'm sort of taking the role of the massive helping bureaucracy. And then we'll move through from there. Okay. So before we go any further, I do want to lay out some of what I see as the pros and cons of the widely held notion that using social media is all about conversation. I think that the fact that we're seeing this phrase used so much means that many organizations, including large bureaucratic ones like mine, governments, means they are realizing the importance of dialogue, which is a positive step. And it seems especially true when it comes to public engagement units. Like many of the units, university representatives we've got here at the conference, and the Office of Public Engagement with provincial government, for example, where relationships are essential. So, I'll just give you a minute to read the cartoon. I do expect this cartoon was probably created with more of a consumer-focused business in mind. And the real kicker is the final one. This is where we probably should be. But I think that it does illustrate the way that large organizations have generally approached social media, particularly in the early days. I think we've moved a little bit beyond some of these first bad options. But we haven't had very much luck figuring out how to get our stakeholders to actually answer that last question. So as a result, we've been doing our best to figure it out for ourselves with varying levels of success. And I think that's the thing about the word conversation. Just because it's being used more often doesn't mean that meaningful public engagement is actually taking place. Despite all of our best efforts to get people talking, in many cases, in my experience, I found that I'm the one carrying the conversation, not the stakeholders who I'm trying to actually converse with. So the second and more important reason that I question the focus on conversation is that I think that it sells us short and sells social media as a tool short. It's kind of a blunt instrument that assumes there's a one-size-fits-all approach, when in reality, there's a myriad number of ways that we can use social media to support those public engagement relationships beyond just discussion and conversation online. So these are, this is a group of Memorial students, faculty, and staff visiting a mine in Labrador. So I wanted to showcase and just let you know a little bit about what the Harris Center's up to. Probably if you saw Rob Greenwood's presentation this morning, this is going to be rehashed. But our role is to encourage informed public policy and regional development in Newfoundland and Labrador by supporting communication and collaboration between Memorial University and the people of this province. We also have an additional sort of guiding mission through the new Penn University Public Engagement Framework that Rob was also discussing. So that framework defines public engagement as collaborations between the university and the public that draw on the knowledge and resources brought by all involved, including mutual respect, mutual contributions, and mutual benefits. So how do we figure out whether our social media activity is actually contributing to these two pretty big missions? Would it be likes on our post? Is it comments? To me, those all feel a little bit too centered on us, which isn't really our mandate. Most of the literature about using social media seems to be focused on more easily measured outcomes like sales or donations. That's not really what we're trying to achieve here. We're in kind of a different boat, and as a result, we've sort of had to figure out what social media success looks like to us in our own circumstances. So ultimately, I believe that the same values, the mutual benefits, mutual contributions, and the openness to collaboration and networking that define everything that we do offline also need to be the same ones that we use when we approach our social media outlets. So this leads me to my first rule of engagement, which is be yourself. Now, I don't mean that you should be overly chatty or share photos of your cat. But what I do mean is that your online activity needs to be an extension of what your organization is already doing in real life. So, for example, and Rob beat me to this one too. The Harris Center acts as a broker between the university and the organizations and people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So what does a broker do? Our role is to know what's going on and to look for possible opportunities and overlaps between our stakeholders in Memorial and our stakeholders in the public and support them in whatever way we can. So as a result, we've got loose connections with a broad range of organizations in real life and also now on Facebook and Twitter in particular. We aren't the ones who are doing the research, but we act as connectors using our large base of contacts inside and outside the university to sort of suggest and support partnerships when we can. In a paper written by none other than our fellow presenter, Krista, I actually found a quotation by Jeff Mulligan of the Young Foundation that I thought really nailed the role of an organization like the university in this kind of situation. So it's social change depends on alliances between what could be called the bees and the trees. So the bees are the smaller organizations, individuals, groups, who have new ideas and are mobile, quick, and able to cross-pollinate. The trees are the big organizations, governments, companies, universities, which are sometimes poor at the creativity angle, but generally good at implementation, and we also have the resilience in the roots and scale to sometimes get things done. So when you translate the bees and trees analogy to the online space, I think that the roots and scale elements of organizations like a university can be useful not so much as conversation starters, but as hubs, network hubs. The reason behind that is that social media tends to be a great connecting tool, but it also often leads us to create our own self-created little universes that reflect our beliefs back to us. It's a benefit in terms of creating a cohesive community, but it also can limit the sorts of things that we're actually exposed to. So when I was pulling together this presentation, I noticed something interesting about our Facebook page that I hadn't been aware of previously, and that was that a full quarter of our Facebook fans aren't actually people. They're groups, in most cases, who are somehow linked to an element of what the Harris Center does. So in addition, I also found that the stakeholders on Facebook span an incredibly broad range of sectors, just like our real-life stakeholder group. So some of them might be interested in our work related to civic engagement, while others may have worked with a Harris Center-funded researcher on a community-identified issue related to water quality, solid waste management, something like that. So it might seem like a small thing, but one of our most important social media roles is also one of the most important things that we do in person. It's acting as a broker for connections, to build connections between organizations that have little in common except for us. Well, we do use social media to market our own events and programs. Craig, I'm sure you've seen that happen.
No.
Sharing information from our stakeholders is also a really important element of what we do. I'd actually hazard to guess that the events and information that we post from other organizations, such as MNL, such as Happy City, are actually more likely to get shared among our stakeholders than the information from Harris Center. And what that indicates to me is that our stakeholders are interested in each other's work, despite their different sectors, and the fact that perhaps in their everyday course of events, they probably wouldn't be connecting with so many diverse groups. So the loose connections that are established within that network build awareness and reputation among the groups, which paves the way for familiarity and potential connections down the road. And in a climate of financial restraint, especially for nonprofit organizations, knowledge of the shared goals, needs, and opportunities of other organizations is a meaningful benefit that goes beyond clicking like. It's also very hard to measure. But it's also worth noting that the Harris Center also gets benefits back from those targeted networks. They regularly share what they're doing, and they get the word out for us about our events, but then we also, we get back from them, and they've even sometimes acted as brokers for us, introducing us to new people and organizations who share our common goals and interests. So sharing your partner's content isn't rocket science. That's a basic element of what we all do on social media. But I think that in commercial social media use, it's overlooked, whereas in what we're doing, it's very important and compelling. It doesn't always have to be tricky or original, but it should be useful. Not only is it a way to extend our everyday activities online, but it's also a way to increase the value that the things that you're doing can have for your stakeholders. So one of our most popular program areas is the Memorial Presents sessions. It's a public forum that brings together Memorial University researchers with community subject experts discussing major issues related to public policy in Newfoundland. We invite members of the public to attend, ask questions, and we also webcast and record the sessions. Something that we've begun doing is live tweeting the events on Twitter. Generally, we get the ball rolling with some quotations from the event or maybe a couple of photos. At first, in my eagerness, I asked a lot of questions. I spent a lot of time trying to get a reaction from the people who were following us on Twitter. But then I soon realized that the people watching online didn't need me to be so assertive. They wanted to have their own conversations rather than being prodded into one that I was trying to invent. And in fact, I probably was the nacho guy at the party in some early instances. But after a couple of not so super successful tries, I realized that we didn't need to be the center of the discussion around our own events. Our viewers started their own discussions, and more often than not, they actually tagged us into them. So in that way, our Twitter account became a hub for the discussion, but not necessarily a driver of it. So these days, we take a little bit more of a supplementary role. So we monitor what's happening, and we jump in whenever there's a question asked or whenever we actually have something of use that can support the discussion that's already happening. So through the questions and requests for more information that our followers make, we're able to offer a more useful session, which improves the quality tremendously. They also, I'm missing a slide, that's okay. They also help us out by pointing out when something goes wrong, such as the infamous time when I misquoted Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi. He made an interesting observation that voter turnout is the Carney in the coal mine when it comes to civic engagement. That was my mistake. So interestingly, we find that the people watching in person also get into the online action. We see plenty of people editorializing and sharing highlights using their smartphones. So that's also a chance for the people in the room and outside of the room to connect in a way that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And also, it's an appealing option for our younger viewers and also for those who have young families for whom a 2-hour evening session just isn't going to happen. So we always see an increase in our followers after these events, which I hope means that they've found the approach to Twitter is useful without being pushy. So in conclusion, there's nothing wrong with a good conversation online, but social media can be used in many ways. The real trick is kind of experimenting to see what your stakeholders want you to do with it.